By Jubilee Secretary General Raphael Tuju to Chief Justice David Maraga protesting judiciary's alleged open bias against Jubilee. Some are reading in Tuju's protest letter the actualization of President Kenyatta's famous pledge to fix the judiciary and to revisit judges' alleged complicity that Jubilee blamed for the nullification of his victory in the August 8th election. What do you think? Text us, talk to us on Twitter, use the hashtag SundayLive and text us on the SMS number 22422. Well, the author of that letter, of course, for Jubilee, Secretary General Raphael Tuju, is here with us tonight. Thank you so much for making time for us tonight. I'll take a quick preview of some of the contents, very brief, because the letter is quite long for TV purposes.
Yes.
You say there, and if you can take a look at those graphics, my Lord, referring to the Chief Justice, irresponsible actions from the executive, judiciary, or parliament can ban this country. And with due respect, you almost succeeded in banning this country after the August 8th elections. I'll come to that later. Some of the other issues, judiciary condemning Jubilee only and not NASA for disobeying court orders, the judges, that's what you're saying. Judiciary also prioritizing NASA cases only, alleged misconduct by judges, and so on and so forth. First, again, and then we'll have we've seen reactions all week about this. One of those that is key to mention here is from the former Chief Justice, Dr. Willie Mutunga, who said on Twitter after he wrote this letter, Raphael Tuju, your letter to Chief Justice Maraga reflects the arrogance of political power and utter disrespect of the institution of the Chief Justice as head of the judiciary and the institutions he heads, including the JSC. Your complaint should have been addressed to the Office of the Judiciary Ombudsman. With all that has been said, this being interpreted as Jubilee now revisiting what they say they'll revisit and you intimidating the judges. First, how do you respond to that?
Well, let me first of all respond to the Honorable former Chief Justice,
Willie Mutunga.
Willie Mutunga is a man I hold in high esteem. I wish that he would take any one of those 8 points I raised in my letter and say, this is wrong, this is a lie, this is, you know, out of order, but to just refer to the letter in generalities and talk about the Office of Judicial Ombudsman or something like that, is very unfortunate. And in fact, I hold him responsible for some of the challenges we have in the judiciary when he talked about you have to obey court orders even if they're idiotic. The powers of the judiciary are there in the Constitution, but all powers must be moderated. For example, you should not issue an order to me to paint the sky orange or to cut off my head. It's idiotic, and I want to tell you, nobody's going to obey that. So I think what we should be talking about is interdependence of the different arms of government. All the reactions which are negative to this letter, none of them has pointed out, I've got 8 points, none of them has pointed at any one of the 8 points and said, this is where this letter goes overboard.
All right. Some have. I mean, if you're saying the Chief Justice, he has not responded yet because this letter was addressed to the Chief Justice. But what has been raised is, first of all, you deciding to address the complaints because they emanate from the conduct of judges through the Chief Justice, through a letter you're writing to the Chief Justice. And that is why I asked you that question, because many are talking about this as intimidation and Jubilee revisiting what they say they'll revisit. There is the Office of the Judiciary Ombudsman to deal with specific problems people may have with judges. There's the Judicial Service Commission. Again, if there are problems with specific rulings in the judiciary, you can exhaust appeals, and that is why if you find again problems with the judges, you can go back to the Office of the Judiciary Ombudsman. Why don't you follow this spelled out avenues of dealing with this?
Unfortunately, there's something called public diplomacy. And unfortunately, the Chief Justice himself has chosen the public domain to address these issues, starting with his ruling on the 1st of September, when he said that if you don't do it the right way, we'll nullify it again. Very careless statement on his part to make, but he's free to make those kind of statements.
That is on the IEBC.
That's on the IEBC that
which
time.
Had not done it rightly.
Yes, and he said if you do it wrongly again, we'll again nullify. Now, then he decides that he wants to make statements that, of course, the government or the Jubilee side is acting in contempt. And he says that publicly. I think it is only fair that we tell him also publicly, because I've written to him before, and when I wrote to him the last time, he chose to respond in a press conference. He's left the domain of the safety of his office and he stepped out into the political arena. It comes with consequences. So the moment he did that, he starts talking about what he considers a contempt of court by the Jubilee side, then we are, I think, within our right to say, but Mr. Chief Justice, how about when our opponents blatantly refuse to obey your rulings, refuse to recognize the presidency that you upheld after a petition? You know, where is the fairness here? You earn respect. You don't get it for free.
Okay. So you're saying you would have you had a problem with the Chief Justice talking in public, reprimanding the government and any other player when he was talking for not obeying court orders, and earlier in last year from interfering with the court processes. Are you saying it's tit for tat? Just because he did that, you're also going to do this?
No.
Or you're going to follow the procedures that are there to follow, to be followed in the judiciary?
We like to follow procedures, because the first time I wrote to him, we followed due process. But he decided to respond in the public domain. In other words, he decided to play politics. Because the moment you come to the public domain, then I don't think that it is fair that you hit us and we don't expose what we feel is unfairness. He has every right to say that, for example, when he decided to give a date in less than 24 hours to hear the case of Njonjo, Muev and Khalifa, to postpone the 26th of October elections, that was fair. And yet, previous to that, we had gone to the same court and he gave us a date which was on 27th, a post facto date. I mean, you know, it is here in black and white. He can say whatever he wants to say to defend that. But for him to, or anybody, to hide behind this thing of or separation of powers, you know, not respecting the independence of the judiciary and so forth, I think that is dishonest. That's morally wrong. So
my question then would be, after you write such a letter to him, what is your expectation? That he does what? He effects changes, because constitutionally he cannot do that. As I said, there are these officers mandated in the judiciary to effect changes with where there are problems. So when you write a letter specifically to him, what do you expect him to do?
Well, I expect that there should be some retrospection, not only on his part, but on all of us. All of us. The judiciary, the parliament, and the executive. And there's something also called public good. And let's leave politics aside. Let's look at the case of the Southern Bypass. It went to court, somebody went to court, injected the government from constructing the Southern Bypass. For about 9 to 12 months, that case was in court. Who was suffering? The people of Nairobi, through unimaginable traffic jams caused by lorries going to Kigali, instead of having to pass on Uhuru Highway through Haile Selassie Avenue roundabout. Those lorries were supposed to be going through the bypass. But then somebody had gone to court and stopped the construction from going on. I mean, there's something called public good that the judiciary should be sensitive to. And indeed, the judiciary has pronounced themselves to that. In fact, if I may, I'm sorry, I have to use the example of Justice Odunga. When he made a ruling sometime just before the elections, he said, okay, fine, I think there's something which has gone wrong here, but for the public good, the greater public good, the court cannot rule in favor of this particular petition. So really, it is all of us to act for the public good.
Okay, I'll look at some of this and I'll revisit that. But I'll look at some of those issues you've raised. For example, you're talking about when the Supreme Court of Kenya ruled to nullify the August 8th elections and ordered for fresh elections, Jubilee government obeyed the court orders because of respect of the judiciary. And you went to say your opponents, NASA, chose to defy your ruling and boycotted the repeat elections without even bothering to come back to the judiciary to canvass their position. You issued no statement to condemn this NASA defiance on your ruling, because you're at liberty to interpret that whichever way. And as I said, judiciary has not responded. But my question here would be, was it in Maraga's or in the judiciary's purview? Because the orders given after that election was that the first respondent, that was IEBC, organizes and conducts a fresh presidential election in strict conformity with the Constitution and applicable election laws within 60 days. Nowhere did it say NASA must participate. It is their right whether they want to participate or whoever else wants to participate or not. If anything, Ekuru Court was not in that case then, but he ended up participating in a fresh election.
Well, one had to accept the fact that, in fact, NASA itself, in several discussions, including this program, I remember being with the Secretary General, they had their kind of decree that there's not going to be elections. And they went further to actually ensure that there would be no elections in some of their strongholds, where their governors actually destroyed materials, voting materials. We went to court about that. We took Governor Anguma to court to stop him from standing in the way of our agents, tearing voting materials. These are things which are in the public domain. Not only did they say there's not going to be elections, but they also actively went to stop elections from taking place in certain places. That is fact. I'm not making this up. Now, when we went to court to try and get the Supreme Court to make a statement about this, clarification or whatever it was, and you have to remember that this is a country whose democracy is still in its embryonic stages. So Jubilee went to court, and we were given a date of 27th of October, a day after the elections. And yet when the other side went to court, within 24 hours, they were being heard. And indeed, the crisis which happened, that the Supreme Court could not get quorum, speaks volumes.
You have also mentioned that. I mean, you make your point when you say you were given, the date was given after the election and NASA was given before. It was judiciary processes. And again, we'll see how the judiciary responds to that. You say it is like almost like he had to eat humble pie.
Yes.
Meaning, I mean, how did you interpret the fact that some judges did not show up that day?
I think that's very, very unfortunate. The president of the Supreme Court should have the full respect of the whole bench.
You don't think he commands full respect?
Now, let's put it, I mean, look, you know, this is stretching it. He ordered for the Supreme Court to sit the following day, within, less than 24 hours. And some of his judges did not show up. He actually had to go on public TV to say that he's not been able to get the quorum, so they cannot listen to the case.
So, and that to you is interpretation that they are not happy with him and they don't respect him?
Well, I don't want to speak for those judges, but you have to remember that two of these judges had issued a dissenting view.
Yeah, but you've said in this letter that that was a humble pie for him, isn't it?
Yes, it was.
That's what you mean, isn't it?
That's what I mean. It is humble pie. I mean, if I'm the Chief Justice and I order my colleague justices to come to the, and sit, and they become unavailable for whatever reason, they were all in the country, then there is a problem.
You've raised some of these issues.
Isn't there a problem?
I mean, it's not about me.
Yeah, because,
there was definitely a problem that day.
Problem.
I mean, and
there was a problem, and he had to go and come on public TV to say that, unfortunately, and the whole country was waiting. The whole country was waiting. I mean, the TV cameras were there to cover it live. Then he walked alone and said, sorry, guys, yes, these proceedings cannot proceed because I don't have a quorum.
Okay. My question to you then is, you've raised all these issues, including again saying your court, on the other hand, found it in order to grant many of Okiya Omtata's prayers, ex parte and all that. These cases in the judiciary have litigants, they have complainants, they have defendants based on evidence, witnesses, arguments. Isn't that what determines how a case should go? Are you saying, Honorable Tuju, that any citizen who is aggrieved, because you are aggrieved, you're from the Jubilee Party, but still you're a citizen of this country, you are aggrieved with how the court has been, because so many people are aggrieved by how a ruling is done here or there. Are you saying if you are aggrieved, you should just write to the Chief Justice and tell him, I'm not happy with what A, B, C, D, and this is happening and things have to change here?
Actually, I've said it again before, that I think there's need for introspection on the part of all of us. At the end of the day, the executive has responsibilities, the judiciary has responsibilities, same with Parliament. We need to treat each other with respect, mutual respect. We ought to, and probably this a weakness that we have in our constitution, there has to be some way of communicating other than through this kind of open letters and press conferences when we have problems with each other. Because at the end of the day, we are running a country which is in transition in many respects, is a multinational country with many ethnic groups, and we have to navigate very carefully to ensure that we make this country viable and a reality.
Well, back to my question, and critics would argue, and I've seen them saying that you're actually saying, or you have done the opposite of what you're saying. You're not respecting the judiciary. My question again was, as much as you're from the Jubilee Party, the party that has formed the government, and you're the Secretary General, you're also a citizen complaining about issues of the Jubilee Party in courts. So many other citizens go to court and have problems with some rulings. Do they behave the way you behave? Or should they do what you've done?
We shouldn't get to that, actually. In fact,
then why would you do that?
You know, it is an indictment of the judiciary at a very high level. Why is it that there are some people who are able to get hearing within less than 24 hours, within the injunctions, ex parte rulings, and so forth? And it seems to be some kind of cartel. It seems to be some kind of, you know, group that are able to get this. It is like, in every respect, a cartel. How come that all the time they're able to get these rulings in their favor within the shortest time possible, and the majority of Kenyans, good lawyers, looking for hearing dates, sometimes have to wait for several months?
Those are the questions you're raising.
Those are the questions I'm raising, and the judiciary should address those things.
All right. You actually said it in the letter. It is so wrong for the judiciary to be controlled by NASA, ODM, leaning judges, ODM leaning judges, or to have judges whose loyalty is first to the tribe and not to the law and the principles of fairness. Unfortunately, that is where we are. Needless to mention, the challenge of judiciary captured by a cartel of tenderpreneurs who bleed this country dry by aiding fraud. Here you're accusing judges. You've not mentioned who, but you're accusing judges of the judiciary. Yet you have not followed the procedures that would see a judge or the judge that you're saying having gone, I mean, you have not gone to the JSC or to the Office of the Judiciary Ombudsman to say Judge ABCD has a problem. I mean, isn't that wrong? How do we know where the problem is? If you know that these things exist, entrepreneurs, you say cartels, people deciding things based on tribe, why don't you raise them? Why don't you raise them in the proper, through the proper channels?
At the end of
and name these people.
Yes, no, look, at the end of the day, the judiciary is supposed to serve Kenyans. And when they're not serving Kenyans, I think it is within my right to be able to express that. Unfortunately, there are some in the judiciary, and I want to be able to clarify this very importantly. Some of the best minds we have in this country, some of the most intelligent people we have in this country are in the judiciary, are in the legal profession. I have nothing but great respect for a lot of the judges who are there, but there is an inherent problem that need to be addressed, and it is unfortunate that the moment you raise those, the judiciary starts saying, "Oh, we are being attacked." Instead of being defensive, I think the judiciary should get into some kind of appreciating that they do have these problems. Don't get into denial. We know that everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people are complaining about the process in the judiciary, corruption in the judiciary, unless they want to deny that there's any corruption in the judiciary, just like we have corruption in the executive.
Right.
And those are vices that we all have to fight.
So if you,
but for them to develop such sensitive, to be so sensitive to any kind of critique, any kind of fair comment, it's not right. And that's why I keep on going back to the 8 points.
Right.
Just point out for me one out of these 8 points where you can justifiably say this is wrong.
Right. The problem is that where is the honesty in this? Because when you're saying it's not all the judges, you hold high esteem for so many judges and people in the judiciary. But then you have not said who it is that is doing this. You've just said judges. And you're not going through the proper channels to name and shame exactly who is doing this. So, how, I mean, it's like blanket condemnation. How do we know who has done what?
It's not blanket condemnation. The 8 points I've raised, I've pointed out. Tell me one of these 8 points which is blanket condemnation. When the Chief Justice finds it that he can call for the judges to come within 24 hours to adjudicate a case which has been presented by ODM, and the one by Jubilee is postponed up to the date after the event, the Attorney General, in the humility of this government, went to court, to the Constitutional Court, to get a declaration on the so-called oathing of 30th of January. He went to court, he requested for a hearing so that this thing can be adjudicated, dealt with by the judiciary, so that we don't have to take policemen to the streets, so that we avoid violence in the street. And you know what they did? They gave a date, 14 days after the swearing in.
Again, Honorable Tuju, when you said, because I've talked about this.
No, but that is fact. It's there in the public domain.
And as I said, judiciary will see whether
and that is
or not.
That's not condemning the judiciary. That's pointing at a specific case.
But I've also been saying, I've been pointing to you that you can go and exhaust all appeals in the specific cases and go to the specific channels in the judiciary to complain, which you're saying you don't see any need to because you've decided to write to the Chief Justice himself.
Yes, and I can tell you, maybe I can explain that. If we didn't have those incidents in which the office of the Chief Justice itself has shown bias, then you go, you can go elsewhere. But the Chief Justice is the president. He is the president of our judiciary. And we are saying to him that you have shown open bias. And we are telling him it is number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. Now, for people to say, okay, fine, what you have said is right, but you should have followed a different channel. That's okay. I'm ready to accept that. But that does not remove the responsibility from the Chief Justice in terms of fairness, in terms of earning the respect of this country. He may have all the powers, but those powers must be moderated by adherence to the Constitution, the same Constitution that they always quote. The same Constitution insists that they have to act fairly.
You addressed him and said, with due respect, you, that is the Chief Justice, almost succeeded in banning this country after the August 8th elections. What did you mean by that?
I meant exactly that. The ruling they made on 1st of September. That ruling of the Supreme Court is actually supposed to become law. None of the other elections, in none of all the other election petitions that we've had in this country, has any judge used that particular ruling as a precedent. It is the biggest indictment of himself.
It depends. I mean, their election petitions are different. For example, the election petition, presidential election petition, was based on the electronic transmission of results. The other election petitions in the High Court may be based on other different things and dismissed on other different things.
That's easy to say. But it has not been used up to this moment.
If it is relevant to that.
Yes. No, but it should act as a precedent. It should act as a precedent.
Where it applies, isn't it?
Yeah, where it applies. And I know that there are cases by some of the petitioners who have used exactly the argument that was used by ODM in terms of transmission, in terms of numbers vis-a-vis process, and they've been dismissed.
We have to wind up now. With all that you've said then, and talking about the Chief Justice that way, going ahead in the end to actually say, after saying this is the biggest indictment of your Supreme Court of Kenya, after saying you almost succeeded to ban this country, talking about bias and how he has responded to issues about Jubilee and not NASA. Ultimately, all these things you're saying, and that this requires mature leadership of all the players, and most importantly, you say, from you too,
yes,
Mr. Chief Justice, almost like you haven't seen it yet. As Jubilee, or as you, Raphael Tuju, but you wrote this as Jubilee Secretary General, are you comfortable or are you happy with the tenure of Chief Justice? Would you want to see, or would you wish to see a change?
No, it is not about what I'm happy with. It's about the public good of this country. And all of us have a responsibility. That's what I've said in the letter. All of us have a responsibility to ensure that we are fair to the public of this country. When you have an injunction stopping the construction of a dam, because of some individual, say, for example, contractors who have gone to court on the award because of the award of that contract to somebody else. You can't park that case in the basement of the Supreme of our judiciary for 1 or 2 years. It is the Kenyans who are suffering because they're not getting water. This is about something higher than the judiciary itself, than the executive or parliament.
All right, thank you so much, Raphael Tuju. We'll see how the judiciary responds to this, if they'll respond to this. Raphael Tuju is the Secretary General, Jubilee Party, and of course, there's always these questions about what your role exactly is now. We had co-opted into the cabinet on a need basis. If you can just define to us.
Well, first of all, I'm very grateful to His Excellency the President for the confidence he's had in me to be able to co-opt me into the cabinet to represent Jubilee. Jubilee Party went across the country with a manifesto, with promises of the things that we want to do in this country, with the big four: housing, manufacturing, food and health. And it is important that we didn't just give those promises and then as soon as we assume office, we just go to our respective offices and enjoy the positions that the electoral victory has given to us. So it is my humble duty and responsibility to represent the Jubilee Party in terms of ensuring that we keep on being reminded of why is it Kenyans voted for us.
All right, so to align your manifestos and your promises with the government and how it performs.
Precisely.
Right, thank you so much. Raphael Tuju, Secretary General, Jubilee Party, thank you so much for making time for us. And congratulations and all the best in your endeavors.
Thank you.
Keep talking to us. The hashtag is Sunday Live on Twitter, and you can text us on 22422. We have sports news after this break. Stay tuned.